In chapter 23 of The Wrong 10 Seconds, we're going to Lydia after the backlash against her father has been intensifying. Chapter 23, Lydia, Thursday. Lydia drew up rules of engagement before confronting her lonely bedroom. She could approach the chamber only after consuming a sleep-inducing Horlicks with added Baileys. And she must only attempt sleep while wearing an old shirt of Paul's dug from the random bits on her fireside chair. Slim Shady refused any part in the proceedings, giving her a wide berth because he disapproved of the heat. So Lydia lay alone under an ancient metal fan, draped in Paul's wide-checked cream and olive shirt. Did he think of her, or was he happy now, just like that, with his wife? Lydia missed her mum almost as much as she missed Paul. If Harriet was well, if she was herself, she would have known something was going on, without Lydia having to confess. Instead, she'd never even hinted to her parents about the attachment, fearing Charlie would ask too many questions. He was always too busy to notice things, but once they were brought to his attention, he wouldn't let them go. Without the stroke, Harriet and Charlie would still be running the pub, thriving after all these years, and they'd be planning adventures for their retirement. Lydia would have taken a job on the coast or gone north to the lakes. She'd have a nice boyfriend, and every now and then he and Lydia would spend weekends at the Transatlantic, enjoying the food, playing games by the fire, and wading in the river. Harriet always 2 steps ahead. Lydia's phone vibrated with an online message. It was 5 a.m. Maybe it was Paul, lying awake, haunted by her. She rolled over in bed, still wrapped in his shirt, and unlocked her screen. Only Alfie. What's going on over there? Are you actually up? I'm not sleeping. What do you mean? I sent Dad a message and he hasn't answered. Usually you can't slow him down. I'm worried I upset him. Join the club. Lydia shook her pillow, trying to air the heat out of it. Everything upsets him. I can't find a way to fix it. That's not like him, though. He never lets people see how much they get to him. I went to help with Mum last night and he practically kicked me out the door. Are you serious? That's bad. I can't imagine him ever not being glad to see us. You should go back first chance you get. Lydia stared at her brother's profile picture. His boyfriend took it while they were on a Lake Erie dinner cruise. Alfie grinned, champagne in hand, wind whipping his black hair. Lydia's profile picture was Slim Shady licking his front paw. I can't take another rejection right now, she wrote. I'm really sorry, I'm just so tired. Nothing's going right. I'm sorry too. I should be there so you're not the lone voice of reason, but I can't. I know I'm asking a lot, but please keep at him, for Mum's sake. He must be driving her nuts. More like wearing her out, typed Lydia. Okay, you're really scaring me now. Go sort them. Channel your inner mum, your inner grandma, if it comes to that. The blind leading the blind. Through the open windows, Lydia's neighbour yelled at her children that it was too early to be up. A dog barked across the street. I'll go over after work. Lydia dozed off and barely arrived at work on time. The night nurse drummed her fingers on the station, ready to be off. A new resident with dementia shuffled at the end of the corridor, clutching a toy dog in one hand and a pack of custard creams in the other. An agency carer, an older woman, looked trepidatious as Beth threw herself at Lydia, hugging her. I so worried on you. Last night was very bad. What, with the Scottish agency bloke? Lydia asked. Beth's nights generally appeared to be successful. No, with the horrible English boys. Pardon? Lydia looked over Beth's head at Matt, who leaned against the window frame, his expression unreadable. The night nurse was already slinging her bag over her shoulder and heading for the door. Nothing major. New resident didn't go to bed at all. Looks as if she's tiring now, so you may have a quiet day. Thanks. Sorry, But she disappeared before Lydia could explain her borderline tardiness. Lydia rounded the desk to flip through the care plans. Usually she came early enough to read up on how their 18 residents had fared since she last saw them. Might as well give up on this day already. Lydia sighed and looked at her team of carers. So, what's going on? She tilted her head at the agency carer's badge. Debbie. The name stuck in Lydia's throat. Morning, she choked. Debbie nodded and inspected the lining of her tunic. Apparently, Alice gave the night nurse trouble again, Matt reported. Told her she was the wrong lady, accused her of stealing the uniform. I suppose she thinks you were meant to be in it. I'll check in with her on my rounds. Lydia turned to the cabinet without moving. Are you all right? Beth asked her. You went away so fast, and then everything was hell. I had to help with my mum. At least, I tried to. What happened to you guys? Matt straightened. We met some ungentlemanly folk while waiting for the bus. They threw rocks and cut Anna. Lydia sank into her seat. Bloody hell, why on earth? Were they drunk? Overheated? They wanted us to be English or go home. Beth pouted. I gave them your boyfriend's kicks. Christ, was this Lydia's fault too, for urging Charlie to give that dreadful interview? A call bell sounded. Debbie cleared her throat. Oh, right. Lydia rubbed her eyes. We better get started. After you all help with breakfast, Debbie, then Matt will take you along to do the doubles. Beth, are you all right? Ready to get started? You'll do the singles once everyone's fed. She's good. Matt put his hands on his sister's shoulders. Let's take care of our little ones, Lisbetta. We work hard because we have every right to be here. Encouraged, Beth bounced to the window and tapped Debbie's arm. I show you kitchen for porridge. As they disappeared down the hall, Matt threw himself into the chair next to Lydia. So, Lydia stared at the care plans binder. That sounds awful. I'm really sorry. Should have given you guys a ride home. As it turned out, Mum was already in bed, so I didn't need to be there, and it's not your fault, Lydia. Did they say anything about the dog? Were they angry about that? And the dog thief? She couldn't stop babbling, so like her father. No, they were angry anyway, and hot and drunk, as you said. Matt angled his chair close, facing hers. 2 questions for you which I don't understand, okay? She shrugged. Shoot. Your mother is totally paralyzed. Why didn't your dad tell the reporter? And why didn't you tell us about him? I did research when we got home last night, and suddenly it was obvious. Lydia's head flopped down as her backbone seemed to give way. It was probably perishing from disuse anyhow, given how little she stood for these days. I don't know, Matthias. Everything's so screwed up, I don't know what's going on anymore. Of course, he put his arm around her. With your breakup, and this too. Is your dad okay? Lydia shook her head. It's so hard. I'm sorry it affected you. I hoped people would find better things to think about. People. Matt sighed. I wish they could realize from this that good, hard-working people will explode when pushed, not just immigrants. Maybe those guys last night used to be good, hard-working people. Matt stood up and gave Lydia one last squeeze. I didn't tell anyone else about your father, but if you want to, it will be all right. Cheers. I know, I just haven't been strong enough. What about speaking to Mr. Harrow's son? He's a nice fellow, nothing like his dad. He could help calm things down. I seriously doubt that, she murmured. Matt vanished to answer yet another call bell, and after a dazed moment, Lydia hauled her little fortress to Alice's room. It was out of her normal order, but life was out of order. Good morning, Alice. The blue eyes shot open. Good morning, lovey. How's the weather today? Sunny and hot, still. Lydia selected the appropriate drawer and double-checked Alice's morning pills. Makes a change, Alice chuckled. She always said that. Lydia stroked Alice's hair back from her face. I'm going to raise your head a bit now, so you can have your tablets to help you stay fit. From the director, are they? Alice scowled. He's sore I won't have dinner with him. I told him I'm quite happy with what I've got. No, the director hasn't got any complaints about your dancing. Lydia set 2 little pills on Alice's tongue. If you're happy with what you've got, well, what is it you've got, Alice? The older woman smiled, eyes half closed again, her bony throat bobbing the pills down. Lydia sealed the cabinet. That's it. Someone will be along with breakfast in a moment. Don't you worry, lovey, Alice called after her. Rain or blistering sun, the postman always turns up. You'll see, you'll see, you'll see. As she'd promised Alfie, Lydia went to her parents' house once she'd done the half-day shift and changed from her hot uniform to a sleeveless top and some linen capris. She still had no clue how to help Charlie, but thanks to Matt's sympathy, she was no longer empty and had some kindness to pass on to him. Exiting Mabel in the bungalow's drive, Lydia stopped short. A jagged seam scarred the double-sized bedroom window, marking her parents as pariahs. A brick sat beneath it, flattening Charlie's hydrangea blooms. Lydia let herself into the house. Dad, Mum, are you guys okay? Charlie's head poked around from the lounge as usual, except he looked terrible. Pale, sweating, with huge circles under his eyes, which he refused to raise toward hers. We're fine. His voice was hoarse. Well, I think your mother is really feeling the heat. But your window! She followed him to the living room where Harriet napped, sweaty tendrils against her cheek despite fans blowing either side of her. What happened? Someone broke it, obviously. What did the police say? Will they send someone to fix it, or do you book somebody? Charlie moved to the kitchen, randomly getting dishes out and putting them back. He ended up piling a stack of dinner plates on his clipboard on the table. I suppose I'll get it replaced. Lydia grabbed his wrist as he staggered past on a mission to freshen the tea towels. Daddy, did you talk to the police? She remembered a rare, still moment with him when she was little. He held her hand as they sat by the fire, and she peered up his forearm, seeing the hair bowed in similar directions, turning only by degrees. You haven't wrung them, have you? He practically fell into a chair. How can I, after what I did? You still deserve protection. Lydia was surprised how forceful she sounded. And Mum does. What about the inspector you've always been friends with? Riddle, right? Ian. She snatched his phone next to the plate-weighted cupboard and scrolled through his contacts. In the periphery of her vision, her father shook. Lydia put the phone down. His shoulders quaked, his face transformed as if slowly imploding, and then Charlie's head fell into his red, over-cleaned hands and he wept. He hadn't lost it like this even when Harriet was in a coma. He went on for everyone's sake. Collapsing now must mean he believed he couldn't go on at all. Lydia squeaked her chair up to his. Either of her parents should have reminded her to lift the chair, not drag it. Harriet's eyelids fluttered. Charlie probably couldn't hear above his heaving sobs. It's okay, Dad. We'll find a way through this. What about all the cooking for the carers' fair? Can't let these other silly things slow you down. We're not allowed to go, he choked. She said... What, because of that short video? He drew in his breath and his voice toughened. Let's not pretend it's the video's fault. It's what I did in it. Honestly, didn't you watch? Did you see my face? She leaned forward. You weren't yourself. You were fed up and you had your reasons. The fact that you never lost your temper with us or with a customer for decades says a lot more about you than the fact you once pushed a dog around. It is still unforgivable. Says who? We deserve better, Daddy. All our family does. Sure, we may have done something wrong. Her own voice caught. But there's more to us than that. So listen. Lydia kept her voice firm. She could make him keep going by giving him work to do. We're going to fix this. I just need you to work with me. The inspector arrived within 10 minutes. Lydia hadn't seen him since his promotion. His kids had been babies before she left home. They'd be nearing secondary school now. She brought him to the kitchen table where Charlie had sprung up and tidied as soon as he registered someone was coming round. He deposited the dishes back in their cupboards and squirreled his clipboard away in the computer stand. He'd re-sanitized his hands and now fixed tea, pouring Harriet's between two beakers to cool it. Inspector. Without meeting Riddle's eyes, Charlie nodded at a porcelain cup prepared for the officer. Charlie, Riddle raised an admonishing finger. I'm still Ian to you, I hope. Flustered, Charlie dripped tea onto himself. Lydia took the beakers from him. Sit down. I'll take Mum her tea. She settled with her mother, glad to be near the fans, although they blocked out the frenzied mixture of self-deprecations and excuses Charlie must have chased through his mind for the last couple of weeks, now spilling out. While she strained to hear, Lydia coaxed Harriet. Wakey, wakey, Mum. Remember all those school mornings you dragged me out of bed and had a cup of tea ready for me? Harriet's eyes looked glazed. Lydia adjusted the headrest. The vinyl squelched as Harriet's head flopped from one side to the other. Her skin shone slick with sweat in the dim room. Fear fluttered in Lydia's stomach, deeper than the other recent horrors, her father's mad ways and even losing Paul. Mum, are you okay? But Harriet managed to smile and drank all the tea before her eyes closed again. Lydia rinsed the beaker and joined the men at the table. I was just so frustrated with work, and I wasn't thinking. I made a stupid decision and for some reason thought it was right. Charlie tripped over his apologies, fists to his forehead, while the inspector nodded. Lydia touched Charlie's sleeve. Daddy, remember how you mistook the dog's name? What was the story with that? He seemed to glimpse a path, however thorny, through the chaos. Ginger, he recalled. The girls talked about a ginger. They were going to make her eat excrement, and they laughed. I got the impression they'd degraded her before. Did the girls speak directly to you at all? Asked Riddle. His forehead fissured. They were unpleasant, but of course they're young, and... What did they say? Well, it quite shocked me, really. Charlie blushed, and Lydia's face flamed too. What an insane, suddenly small world that Paul's own child had produced this humiliated reaction in Lydia's distinguished father. Riddle said, I'd like to know, Charlie. As your friend, not just from a law enforcement perspective, I'd like to know what they said to you. He took a deep breath, enough to compensate for Lydia's anxious, shallow ones. You have to understand, all I did was greet them, the way I would with any customer, and it was the blonde one, he added apologetically, as if he didn't want to say anything against her after the pain he'd then unwittingly inflicted. She made it clear they didn't want my help, and she called me a pedo. What? Lydia's cheeks raged even hotter. Riddle frowned. Was there anything else? No, they just ran off. Charlie bowed his head. No one's ever spoken to me like that before. I can't imagine I've ever done anything that would... Of course you haven't, Lydia snapped. Daddy, that girl's a bully. She'll say nasty things to anybody. Couldn't you tell that? Even Paul had known it. It just didn't seem to count for anything now. Her voice carried over the sound of the fans. Harriet twitched awake and watched blearily. Riddle finished his tea. I understand why that would upset you, mate. So what happens next? Lydia asked. The inspector stood, lifting his chair so it wouldn't squeak. I'll send an officer over about the window and we'll keep a presence in the area tonight. They're predicting rain, at last, so there shouldn't be many others about. Will I be charged? Charlie's voice was thick with threatening tears. I doubt it. I need to find out a couple more things, and I'll speak to the Harrow family again tomorrow. I think we can reason things out. Charlie stumbled from his seat after his friend had gone. He moved slowly but with purpose, toweling Harriet's headrest, talking softly to her, readjusting the fans, peeking at her catheter bag. Mum seems really out of it. Is she draining okay? Lydia regretted the instinctive question when Charlie stiffened and frowned slightly. It wasn't as if she enjoyed using medical language about her own mother, but it had its uses. It's slow, but we've been having lots of drinks, and if the heat does break tonight, that could only help. Charlie snapped his marigold gloves on. Fine. Lydia brought him the teacups. She's in good hands, as usual. He lowered his head. I'm really not sure about that. I am. Daddy, I know how hard you work to take care of Mum, okay? A lot of people couldn't do it. But you know how I got confused about the dog's name? Charlie placed a saucer in the dish drainer. I had a similar false impression when, on the day your mother fell ill. What do you mean? I thought she was at the river. People were saying, it's a bit busy for you to be on your own. Where's your lovely wife? His shoulders trembled again. He stopped trying to wash up. I kept telling them she'd ventured off for a swim, maybe to read a book by the river. Because I'd seen her, Lydia. I was putting glasses away before we opened, not long after she'd gone up to clean the rooms, and I saw her walking proud and fast on her way outside. Lydia's stomach knocked against her lower ribs. Harriet hadn't left the first room she meant to change over. The guests checking in found her collapsed there hours later. Charlie finished, his voice small. And I think most of her is still there, still happy, by the river. She's not. Lydia seized his arms. Mum's here. It may be lovely to imagine her soul's not trapped like this, but she'd rather be at your side. And she's probably desperate for you to talk to her so she can help you. See, like you talked to Ian and now he can help. His shoulders slumped. I can't. She'd just forgive me. Oh, the horrors. What's wrong with that? I don't want to be excused. I want to really be better, to assure everyone, assure myself, I'm not the man in that video. Atonement rather than forgiveness. Lydia drummed her fingers on the counter. The idea was so typical of him, but so unrealistic. Some things you can't atone for. Some people would give anything for mere forgiveness. In that case, we've got our work cut out for us, haven't we? He blinked. Why, what have you done wrong? Given you shitty advice lately, for starters. He put his arms around her. Oh, Liddy lady, consider yourself thoroughly atoned. You too, Daddy. She rested her head on his shoulder. You too. She left him with a to-do list, one of his favourite things. Harriet watched them compile it, bemused. Now, Lydia felt surprisingly charged up herself and attempted a run. But when she reached the little playground where she used to meet Paul, she turned off her music and sat on the spinning disc, its metal tarnished by multitudes of bottoms. A Pokemon trading card languished in the dirt, branded with a muddy footprint. A pink hoodie had been left behind, draped over dusty hawthorn branches. She and Paul had been here, together, happy, barely a week ago. But he was gone, and she was unforgiven. Lydia shuffled her sandaled feet sideways, propelling the disc in a mournful circle. She gazed beyond rows of council houses to the new development where Paul must be cozying up to Deb in the twilight, maybe on their deck. Smoke from a garden waste fire curled above the rooftops and hung, trapped by the still warm air. The hawthorn border rustled, the forgotten pink hoodie nodding uncertainly. Then a darker black hoodie appeared, properly embodied by a thin girl, so pale her face glowed in the dusk. I've seen you before, Lydia remarked, out and about. What is it you go looking for? The girl tugged on a single rusty curl. Explanations, art, lots of things. Lydia shuffled back around so the saucer's empty side faced the girl. Want to sit a while? Okay. The disc barely dipped beneath the added weight. Overhead, the smoke melted into gathering pink-edged clouds. 2 pigeons swooped onto the overflowing rubbish bin and pecked at slushy cups and crisp packets. Further toward the city centre, a siren wailed. Lydia and her new companion sat listening, watching. That's the end of chapter 23.